if you really dial down to what people want, people don't want to just learn how to use your tool, right? People want job security. People want the feeling of, I'm not going to get left behind in this crazy AI race that is happening. How do we compress that into a smaller slice of the job so that now people's first thought is, oh, let me fire a bunch of people or let me reduce people's jobs. My best guess would be that I think it's a lack of creativity, right? Like I think the larger companies get, the more successful companies get, the more you start to view your entire business as a spreadsheet. I actually still think there will be more jobs created net long term than will be removed from AI, which is a hot take, but we'll see.
This episode is made possible by SaaStoNet 2026, where SaaS meets sea and sand. So builders and founders running early stage companies all face the AR or human question right now. So the customer support, content team, marketing team, education, sales, hiring, you name it, right? So they all ask, should I automate this or keep it human, and why? And if automation is the key to fast scaling and software isn't really a differentiator, where does the human-centric value lies? Trying to answer that question, I speak to Yash Terkiwal, the founding go-to-market engineer running education at Clay, the company building one of the most automated go-to-market systems. Yash, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm very excited to speak to you today because you're very opinionated and I love that.
Yes, very opinionated, for sure.
So first and foremost, how do you like SaaStoNet so far?
So far it's been incredible. I think even like listening to everyone here about the last 3 years of SaaStoNet, how it's grown, beautiful location for a conference. I was just telling a friend, why don't all conferences happen on the beach? Seems like an incredible place to have everyone be happy, enjoy the weather, have some good food, and then get to know each other much better. I feel like it's much more like a community than like a big conference at this stage, which is always the best part of these events.
It is.
Yeah.
And I remember on our prep chat, you told me you hate networking. How does networking feel here?
I think it doesn't feel like networking. I think that was my whole point, right? Like I don't love networking because it's like the explicit point of us interacting is for me to get something from you or vice versa, typically job, career, transaction, contract, you name it. It's much better when you get to know people and you genuinely enjoy what they're doing or what their opinions are or how they contribute back to your own thoughts. And then naturally, all the other things kind of happen and flow. But putting one before the other sort of messes up the order of things.
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start with the contradiction that I outlined here. Mm-hmm. So you sell automation, Clay, for go-to-market people and operators, mostly sales departments, but your job is to teach sales reps how to use it. What's the part of your own job that you automate, and what would happen if you did?
Yeah, so I think the question is like, where do I automate within my own job, teaching people how to think about automating these tools, and where do I still keep things human, right? I think that a lot of automation, I actually think like maybe the hot take here is that none of this is new, right? Like AI is just the next era of automation, but I've been automating since long before AI existed. I have an original programming background, right? So building, writing systems. I quickly came out of that because when I was getting into the workforce, it was Zapier and it was Airtable and it was all these like low code tools was a big thing where I can now stand up an automation system inside of a day instead of having to build it from scratch via code in like a few weeks. And so I think always the pattern has been, let me automate all the parts of my work that don't involve talking to a human, right? There's so much of a knowledge work that is like data accumulation, gathering, synthesis, dissemination that is not actually human. It's really just like me sitting down and trying to turn my thoughts into representations of other thoughts for people to then go interact with. So before AI, a lot of that was like, how do I automate in the sales process, for example, the gathering and finding of all the data that I need, right? You had SDRs for years going and downloading CSVs from like 12 different places, uploading those CSVs to different email tools, enriching them, gathering them, then writing creative copy, emailing people, and then repeating. That was an entire job. But 80% of that job has no human interaction. It's just people typing into a computer. So I think a lot of what Clay did first in sales, and now we're thinking about marketing and CX, et cetera, is how do we take all of the job that is not human work? It never has been human work. It's just evolved because computers have evolved faster than human relationships have. How do we compress that into a smaller slice of the job so that now people's first thought is, oh, let me fire a bunch of people or let me reduce people's jobs because I just think about doing work the way that we've always done work. But I think the actual opportunity, which is what you see a lot of companies starting to do now, ourselves included actually, is now I have 80% more time. What are all of the human things that we weren't doing before because we had so much time spent in the data that now we have the opportunity to do? How much more creative can I enable an SDR or a salesperson to be? How many more events can I send them to? Those ultimately become your biggest competitive advantage.
So you're basically saying that the time that we are saving on works that make sense to be automated, that is not interaction with other humans, can very well explode right now. And we should reinvest all the assets and the money and the budget into the human interaction type of work where the trust is actually created.
Exactly. Like I think a really good example of this is less my job and domain, but I think more a part of our team, right? A lot of people for a long time were saying, you don't need a BDR or an SDR anymore. You can just have Clay.
Yes.
Many people may not realize we actually have a giant BDR SDR team now. We have, I think, 20 people maybe growing in the States and then 5 to 10 in EMEA. It's going to become one of our largest teams very soon. Not because BDR SDR work isn't valuable, but because it's changed. So now, instead of having a bunch of BDRs doing all the things that we know Clay can do, Clay unlocks all the BDRs and SDRs on our team, run by Rob, who's wonderful at this, to go find and build pipeline, right? Like the original definition of an SDR is to go build early stage pipeline for sales reps. As your company scales, that still becomes a really important function that can't be fully automated. So now let's say we're trying to talk to insert Fortune 500 company name here. It takes a while to get someone's attention and to build someone's trust. All of the data around how we've tried to reach out to that person in the past is stored in our CRM. Now the SDRs and BDRs, instead of having to go hunt for that data or find it themselves, have access to it immediately. So now I'm thinking of like an SDR on our team, his name is Brock, right? Brock is looking through all of our Salesforce data and all of our accounts, and he's thinking about, okay, we've had this person go to these events, we've had these people attend these webinars, we've had this person subscribe to a newsletter. What do I think is the most compelling way to potentially try and interact with somebody already existing on the account or potentially somebody new? And then maybe I'll tie together different threads to 3 different people and try and message one for a meeting about stakeholders, try and message one for a meeting about budget, and try and message one for a meeting just between leadership, and see if that can be a new opportunity to build a relationship. And so we have tons of people doing that at scale now. And so that's the more human part of the job that was always sort of set to the background because there was so much other data work to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this curtain now is being lifted, and it's an opportunity for the founders and the leaders to choose and say, okay, I see this as an opportunity to focus more on the more valuable work and build the relationships that are actually closing those deals rather than cut the workforce. But it's a tough decision, right? Or no?
Well, so, I mean, this is another strong opinion, right? I think it is a tough decision for some, but then also to me, it's a very obvious decision, right? Like I think a lot of the times that people think about budget cutting or cost cutting, it's about viewing your company in isolation. If I am a company that today makes $100 million in revenue, and then I have new technology that automates a ton of the existing work, sure, the immediate answer is, wow, I can save $30 to $40 million, which would be a huge chunk just on labor costs, and then make the same amount of money. But the thing that people always forget, which I don't know why, is that you don't exist in a vacuum. You are competing against other companies in a similar space, constantly against new tools. So you want to maintain a competitive advantage. Now, if every single other company is cost cutting, you're fine. But likely at least 1 or 2 of those people are going to say, I now have more budget and resources to spend on overall what is a revenue generating mechanism. The ultimate goal of every single company is just to make more money. And so, yes, if you are at the peak capacity of making money, then cost cutting makes a ton of sense. But there is still so much unexplored space for how we can continue to generate money via relationships, deals, opportunities, that it's still green space for a lot of people.
Yeah, we're going to dig into that just a bit. Just to close this part is, if we, for example, map the org chart of the high growth go-to-market team in 2023 against the 2026, so some revenue is the same revenue, as we say, same revenue. They're at the peak of whatever stage they are. What jobs get smaller, what jobs get bigger, and what jobs didn't exist before that is just being created in 2026, 2025?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I don't know if there's any, instead of framing it as jobs, I frame it as like work that gets smaller, bigger, and then doesn't exist, right? You can then apportion the jobs however you want to. Like, we've invented the term go-to-market engineer, which is a job that exists because the work has become much easier to productize. Right, so the reason we call it a go-to-market engineer is because a lot of the data work that you're talking about, a lot of the I need to go in and copy paste different formulas, or I need to make sure that the capital letter starts every single title, or I need to make sure that all of my zip codes have a proper 7 to 9 digit format for the appropriate country areas. That used to be work that humans were doing. And I can't imagine a more boring job than spending 8 of my hours in a day looking through my CRM and then saying, oh, that one needs to be capitalized, enter, Command T. No. I think that work has become a lot smaller now because you have software tools like Clay, like Claude Code, like Codex, whatever you want to call it, right? These AI native tools that allow humans now to build systems to do work that previously only humans were doing. So now the system takes away a lot of the manual data work, a lot of the manual data cleaning, and a lot of the grunt behind it. So in sales, that tends to be list building, enrichment, creative data solving, sometimes even copywriting. In marketing, that tends to be exclusion lists. It tends to be selection criteria. It tends to be targeting. How much money are you spending on which ads in which areas? In customer success, it even tends to be all of the data aggregation I do for each of my most important customers between each QBR. I don't want to have to spend a week now looking through every single weekly meeting we had, looking at the product to understand where the customer is tracking, and then thinking about all the communications I've had. I would rather know as a human, I've been the one building that relationship. What are the overall themes I should be shooting for? How should I be then imagining a vision that I can work backwards from into what the next quarter should look like for this customer to help them grow strategically so that we can grow with them? All of those are work pieces that get larger now that the data portion is getting smaller. And then once you start to rearrange the pieces of how the work has changed, then you start to understand what new jobs might exist. So as an example, the GTM engineer definition happened in a lot of ways because so much of a previous RevOps person or a sales growth engineer systems plus a salesperson's job was this overlap of data. And now that we have the tools to be able to build systems that take away 60% of the work for all of those different personas, now we can kind of collapse all of the other human functions for that persona into one role, and that person becomes a GTM engineer. And then as that job becomes more mainstream in many ways, you start to see the work around that job evolve. We're going to talk about this later today, but one of the things that we're seeing in GTM engineering even is the emergence of 2 different types of GTM engineers. There are your systems GTM engineers who are solely focused on the data architecture, the building, the platform.
So we're already in that stage where there's this proliferation of the
new
job. Right?
Exactly, because the work is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
Right, and then you have to adapt the jobs and the titles to fit the work.
That's the thing. I'm so happy that you said that, because I feel like the leaders of today and tomorrow should be thinking in those terms, in that framework. Instead of just cutting the jobs that got less work, because the bigger pieces of the workload are automated, why don't you keep the humans and reinvent the work that the people are actually doing and put them in a position where they can bring in more value through conversations, interactions, what humans can do well with other humans?
Yeah, it's a great question. I wish I knew the answer either. My best guess would be that I think it's a lack of creativity, right? I think the larger companies get, the more successful companies get, the more you start to view your entire business as a spreadsheet.
Numbers.
Right, numbers. Yeah. But ultimately, what's behind the numbers are humans. And I think that if you have creativity to be able to reimagine what work looks like in a world where tooling is fundamentally changing how your business operates, you're able to stay on the cutting edge. Because there are still lots of opportunity to reimagine what happens. I actually still think there will be more jobs created net long term than will be removed from AI, which is a hot take, but we'll see.
It's a hot take, and I must say I kind of agree with that one.
Yeah.
But it's a painful change, right? It's a very painful change. And we've been leading this game of optimization for a very, very long time. And we see AI as another optimization tool, which is okay. But it is not just that. It is actually, as you said, we need more creativity to understand how this new technology is going to be embedded in the processes that are quite old and that are extremely focused on optimization.
For sure. I think that's one of the big problems, right? Like, I think that you're right, there will be a lot more new work that exists in this new era, but historically, creatives and systems engineers have existed in silos, right? You either identify as a creative or as a programmer, and people have thought those were separate things. But now, this is the pain of the new era that we're working into. You kind of need both, right? You kind of need to be able, if you want to leverage AI well, you have to be able to understand how to think in systems, how to think computationally.
Everybody, like on every single individual job or level in the company.
Yeah, otherwise you're not going to be using AI well, right? Otherwise, like, I've seen people prompt AI, and I'm just like, oh, the core issue here, I can give you a million different prompts, but if you don't understand why you're writing a prompt that way, your critical thinking is limited. Right, so we need to teach people how to think critically or computationally much more effectively. And then what that unlocks is more creative ability for people to then go do new, more interesting things, take bigger bets, make more bold hypotheses, and then run those experiments to the point where they then re-enter that data into a system. But because people have existed so long in either creative or computational, we're not used to the era where, like, you want both, which is what I think historically people have called, like, the unicorn human. Right, like someone who can do the programming and can talk to humans and can be creative, but the bar is just getting higher for everyone. And then as more and more people become that, then more and more people will need to meet that bar. Otherwise, you as an employee on the market are losing out to that skill set.
You just mentioned critical thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's the top and number one. It always has been.
Always has been, yeah, probably the most important thing.
But right now, it's people are more aware of what happens when there's lack of it, right?
Right.
So you as an educator, ex-educator and still an educator, right?
Right. Yeah.
You would know that. So how do you install mechanisms to ensure critical thinking within the organization to deliver the high-value work that you want by combining creativity and the automation?
Yeah, I think the honest answer is I don't know if I have any mechanisms that I've put in place for it. I think a lot of that answer is typically through hiring and recruiting and having, like, a high bar for people that come into the org. This is where I think a lot of, like, my team's work is on helping people think critically, right? So there's, like, work that we do to train people to think critically, but then when we hire people at the company, I'm looking for a base level of critical thinking most of the time, right? I don't have...
What is that base level of critical thinking?
It's like, can you reason through business decisions? Can you reason through, like, structured priorities and think through, like, what the right call is at the right time? At any given point in a business, we could be doing a million different things, right? It's greenfield still. What is the right order of operations to be doing those things in? For example, we run in-person workshops right now, right? We could run workshops for private equity companies that we're partnering with. We could run workshops for enterprise companies that we want to accelerate pipeline. We could run workshops for new prospects in enterprise. We could run workshops for the community. We could do all sorts of workshops. We don't have a million people to do a million workshops. So, given limited resources and bandwidth, what are the right workshops to prioritize? What are the right ways we should be reaching out to people, right? Then you get into workshop additions and you could say, oh, we have a whole CRM of people, we should just do outbound to our existing prospects in pipeline. Or maybe some people have been like, we should run ads. Some people have thought, oh, maybe we should go do, like, boots on the ground campaigns. We should put up flyers in different schools. All of these are valid ideas. But some of them are better ideas than others because it requires some of the critical thinking to understand, okay, here's what the business goal is. I want to first prove success by driving better pipeline across our SLG motion. If that's the case, let's toss out every single growth tactic that is not related to our existing pipeline. While those might seem like exciting ideas to drive an ultimate metric up, it's not aligned with the goal of the thing that we're trying to do. So let's then keep our invite process and our workshop seat filling process exclusively to people in pipeline today or early stages of pipeline. Build out an entire motion just to make sure that those workshops are running at the tightest capacity that we can for our existing pipeline. And then if we want to come back in to do ads or to do hypergrowth events or viral moments, that's probably still a right idea to have, but for a different type of workshop at a different moment in time, right? So like that's a level of critical thinking that I want everyone on my team and probably at the company broadly to be able to have. And it's never perfect, right? Everyone always has different thoughts about what the right answer is. And so I think in a company culture, the ongoing way to sort of coach in what is critical strategic thinking is often having long, hard conversations about why do you want to do that thing? And pretty much always the answer to like flawed critical thinking is just ask why 5 times. Why do you want to do that? Why do you think you want to do that? Why do you think that's the most important thing to do? Why do you think that's the best avenue of doing that? Have you considered these 6 other things that might be better? And then most of the time, when you ask those questions in that order, the person realizes it themselves.
But you think critical thinking is heavily dependent on the experience?
Say more, what do you mean by that?
So because we're talking about quite operational and strategic questions that you need to ask yourself in order to distill to the right answer and pick the right tactic or strategy or the focus or whatever you're doing. Does the critical thinking enhances, through your experience, or is fundamentally rooted in a specific human trait, personality, or something like that?
I think people can develop critical thinking for sure. I think it's a skill, it's not a natural talent. It's sort of like, for example, one of the ways that I often joke about testing critical thinking amongst my friends is like, I love strategy board games, right? So like games where there's like a certain level of complexity and rules, the ability to then learn a new game from scratch, understand the rules that you're playing under, and then figure out what an optimal strategy is, that's critical thinking. It's the same exact skill as what you would apply in business. It's just that we've changed the rules. Now instead of points on a board, we're talking about money. And now instead of pieces on a board, we're talking about teammates. Right? So critical thinking shows up in all of these other dimensions and areas. But I think that a lot of people maybe don't apply that thinking laterally. Or what often happens, maybe like another unpopular opinion, is that a lot of people are taught to be really good at one thing and then get good at that thing over time, and then they find comfort and safety in that skill. So, for example, let's say an engineer, right? You get really good at writing code, you get really good at architecting software decisions, you get really good at thinking about how to write flexible, scalable code for a business at scale. That's useful within one dimension, but then also if you want to continue to be able to grow in your impact at an organization or on a team, you have to learn how to communicate properly with your colleagues, how to set strategic vision and priorities, because once you're a team of 10 or 100 or 150, your decisions no longer exist in isolation. Your decisions are, dependent on what everyone else does. And so you need to also be able to think critically about how am I working on this project in a way that is aligned with the 140 other people that I'm working with in order to produce the best next viable outcome for what we're trying to ship together. And that is a meta skill that lies beyond the code that you're writing.
That's interesting that you're saying. So when you mentioned code, the progression I keep seeing is value used to live in code, right? It was expensive, time-consuming to build something like that. Then in data, right? Now it's relationship, and the relationship building is the ultimate human thing to do, right? Do you see the same 3 layers?
I think so. I would say that it's actually always, in my opinion, maybe again a hot take, it's always been about relationship building as well. It's just that for a while, code and data were able to make up for poor relationship building, right? So like, okay, now whether or not I enjoy working with you, if you are the only product in the market that I can use, that sucks, but I'm going to use that product regardless of whether or not I have a good relationship with you. As more and more, as the competitive barriers to entry get lower, the relationship element just becomes more and more front and center. Now I get the choice as a buyer on the market to say, okay, maybe the products are similar, but I enjoy working with this one better, or like I enjoy the partnership better, right? There's like multiple layers to relationships as well from a commercial standpoint. Layer 1 is the bare minimum. Do I enjoy spending time with you? If I don't enjoy spending time with you, if we have for whatever reason a combative relationship, You're sort of at the gate, for lack of a better word. Now, let's say that I enjoy working with you, and there's other people in your industry I also enjoy working with. The next question becomes, which one of these different providers are actually more helpful to me in the journey of growing my own business? Ultimately, this like capitalistic business building game that all of us are playing should be positive sum. It should be the case that if I am selling you something, you see benefits and reap rewards from that thing that I'm providing, and then you get those benefits vice versa from me. And so if we're entering into a partnership, then ideally my incentive is to help you grow as much as possible, and then your incentive is also to help me grow as much as possible. And if we can do that more effectively than anybody else on the market, that's an undefeatable solution, right? People want to work with people who they enjoy working with and who make their work better. And then it's very hard to compete with that.
And you kind of translated that philosophy in what you're doing right now at Clay, especially when it comes to education. It's a very, very good growth lever, and it's working really, really good. You can share some numbers if you have, but my question is, if it's working very good, and this is not the first time ever that someone is using education as a growth lever and to put themselves as a category leader out there, especially with something new in technological sense, right?
Right.
Why aren't other people or other companies copying that?
You know, I wonder if I'm going to get in trouble for saying all this, but it's fine. I'm fine getting in trouble. I would actually say my hot take here is I don't know that a lot of other companies have ever prioritized learning in the way that we prioritize it. I think a lot of times people see education. This comes back to like my whole problem with networking, right? People look at education and they say, this is a growth lever for the business. Let's invest time in education. However, it's hard to track or attribute everything related to education, right? Like, let's say I have an incredible series of courses on the website. Users come to the courses, they watch a couple of them, maybe a couple of months later someone logs in, they start building a platform from one of the courses. Is it really the fault of one of the courses that person came and converted, or is it actually an element of this person also talked to a sales individual, they also talked to some of their friends, they went to an event that we were hosting, and all of those touch points played a role in their ultimate decision to convert? I think when businesses get really large and think about marketing as a really uniform, directional, like ROI version of spend, you lose some of the magic of, we have an ecosystem of things that people love engaging with. So that's number one. And then number two is also just that I think a lot of people think about education sort of in a command and control style of learning. So a lot of times people talk about education, you're thinking courses, right? I'm watching video content
Everybody's
online.
Thinking courses.
Yeah,
So
courses are the bare minimum.
What's wrong with that? Yeah.
Courses are just the bare minimum, right? They're necessary but not sufficient for creating powerful learning. The most you can maximize a course is, I would call it edutainment. I think Webflow is probably the first person in the space to do this really well. They made the courses as entertaining as possible, right? So if I'm going to have to force you to watch 12 to 16 hours of video content, I might as well make it fun for you. But that's still not the best way for anyone to learn anything. What's like the last thing that you learned really effectively on your own that you really enjoyed? How did you learn it?
Yeah, by doing.
By doing it, right? So what courses don't practice doing whatsoever. So then why aren't more people building programs in which people learn by doing?
Why not? Because we're always in this optimization game, right?
Right.
So we're extremely focused on numbers. We're extremely, as companies, organizations, are focused on optimization. And we love this new AI toy because we think it's going to help us cut costs and optimize even better. But we are missing the point, it looks like.
Yeah.
And especially, for example, when you mentioned just education. Everybody can build a course. Like, they can create an AI avatar, they can write a script, the avatar can read the script, whatnot. It can be done really, really fast. But that's not really a true education. What's your philosophy? What are the 3 points of your philosophy that differentiate what you are doing at Clay and what's working against everybody else?
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the way we approach learning at Clay is we think about it as learning, not education, right? So that's why we call it the ecosystem team, right? We have a lot of different parts of the ecosystem. Part one is community. You want people to feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves, right? Like that's what colleges did really well, even if education was not front and center, right? Like you belong to a university, you belong to a school. We want people to feel like they belong to different parts of the Clay ecosystem. And so we have the Slack community. We have all these Clay clubs in real life where people get to meet up and share tips and just nerd out about what they're learning, right? That cross-pollination of who's on the cutting edge and what are they doing is already more of an advantage than any content we could single-handedly put out there. I would rather have the community create thousands of pieces of content that help all the people that want it than me have to decide the one type of content that thousands of people are going to benefit from. Then we have different subsections of that community and ecosystem. We have specific programs for startup founders so they can belong to an element of the startup community in the ecosystem. We have specific programs we're now launching for college students. We're thinking about each of these populations in a special way that makes those populations feel seen. Then you have content, right? Content is important, but to your point, we don't automate any of the content, right? If everyone can do it, it's not worth doing, is sort of my opinion, right? That just means that's the baseline. So we would rather do something more interesting, more innovative, so to speak, which for us on the content side is, you're here to learn something, let's make it as quick as possible, let's make it as easy as possible, and let's make it as fun to watch as possible. So I think a lot of people have told me they enjoy watching our videos because it feels like they know me, right? It still feels like you're watching a human through a screen. I'm not sitting there reading a script, talking about how to connect AI to your database. This would be boring to listen to for hours on end. I would fall asleep myself. And then the other part of it, all of that is still nice, but it relates to experiences, right? We have these workshops that we do IRL. We have these cohorts that we run online. That's where people in the community get to interact with the content. And I think the most important part of learning is creating space for people to fail, right? Content does not create space for you to fail. Content creates a space for you to digest something, but exercises, projects, things that matter to you, which are the reason you're learning the thing in the first place, are how you're going to learn overall, and you're not going to get it right the first 4 or 5 times. But the hardest thing about adult learning and education is that people are used to getting it right. No one likes being wrong. People get so used, especially smart people, to being told that they're brilliant at what they do, that they really have the skills and the chops to make it in their chosen career or field, that failure is an unfamiliar muscle to a lot of people. And you have to create the community, the environment, the content, and the experiences that allow for people to fail proudly with each other so that they can then learn from those failures as quickly as possible. And then the more you create a community of people who are all happy to fail together, learn, and then build something new, the more those people become the inspiration for everyone else to learn that thing as well. Right now, I can join the community and say, oh, Bob, right, who didn't know Clay 2 months ago, and then told me he messed it up 3 times, but then went through the cohort program and actually worked on a couple of exercises, and now he gets it, and now it's his skill. He's really proud of it. We've helped Bob go from uneducated about AI to empowered by AI. And that fear is what most people are struggling with today, right? If you really dial down to what people want, people don't want to just learn how to use your tool, right? People want job security. People want the feeling of, I'm not going to get left behind in this crazy AI race that is happening. And content is never going to do that. Content is maybe necessary, but again, not sufficient to helping people feel like, oh, I'm part of a community of other people. We're not all going to get left behind. Oh, I have continuous moments to experience and learn and up-level my skill set. I'm not going to get left behind. I am on the cutting edge with everyone else. And that is key to creating like a real learning ecosystem for people.
Because I don't know how this played out, how you joined Clay, but with your ideas around how education should be done and how go-to-market, what go-to-market engineer function means, because you created one. Did you have any pushbacks from the stakeholders in your company when you presented the idea? Okay, now we're not going to do a bunch of content filmed and boring and create like education sessions and, webinars or whatnot. Yeah. We're not going to do that because that's just boring and it's not education. We're going to put a lot of effort and harness the community and build a community that will pour information into the space of education that we're building, the platform that we're building.
Yeah, it's a good question, and the honest answer is that it's much easier to connect the dots looking backwards than it is forwards. Mm-hmm. So if we're being completely honest, right, it's not like I joined the company and then we thought, oh, Yash will do education, right? Like I think when I joined, we were maybe 8 or 9 people. we had no need for education at that point, right? Like we just needed to first build a business. Right. And so like I've had a lot of job titles over the years, some of which I did well, some of which I did very poorly. And essentially throughout each of those processes, like the running joke at the company is I think I've done a little bit of every job, whether or not I've done it well. And I think the benefit I had from Varun, one of our founders, and Kareem, always was that I think they met me in an environment where I was already doing a lot of this learning activation programs through a previous company that I had started. So I worked at a company called Alt MBA that was sort of the place where I learned a lot of this like new pedagogy way of thinking about learning, which is not all that new. It's just really bringing back things that we've always known, but just never existed in a formal traditional school system. And then I was building programs with creators to help bring that style of learning to more and more places. And that's actually where I met Varun. And then Varun and I became friends. And I think Varun, I don't know if this is actually true, but I would assume, because he's always sort of pushed me in the direction of wanting to do education and community. I think he has sort of known since the beginning that like if we're going to build something crazy and new and innovative in the space, we're going to need to educate and bring people along that journey. And so the skill set that I have will be helpful in that regard at some point. It just wasn't in the first year and a half or 2 years even of me at the company. And the irony is actually, I think I resisted. So I remember actually when Varun asked me to do more of the university education stuff, I said I'm down as long as it doesn't turn into a content job. Because I don't want to spend my day sitting down in front of the camera just recording content for people. One, I would hate it. Would not be fun. And then two, I don't think it's the most effective thing. And he said, no, I know. You get it. Go do the thing the way you want to do it. That's like the way I want us to try it. And then I think once we started experimenting with it, it became very clear that that was something we should invest more and more time into.
Yeah, you did a pretty good job there.
Thanks, appreciate it.
So what's the ROI on what you have built so far? Do you have a number in your head?
No numbers that I can provide, unfortunately. I think we do a lot of it is very vibe-based, right? Like I think we're getting more and more data infrastructure in place now on the marketing side, but I think the numbers that we pay the most attention to are like the hundreds of thousands of people that post on LinkedIn without us asking them to, right? The people who say, wow, this changed my life, or this experience has reformed the way that I think about AI. And so that for us till date has been enough evidence to just say, let's keep doing it, right? Because you can't really buy that level of engagement. But that's the only number that I really have at the moment, yeah.
You know why I'm asking this? Because again, we're obsessed with numbers, and it's very refreshing to understand there are founders, they're just not, they understand that growth can't be really put in a spreadsheet. There's something in between that you have to read and feel and see to understand that you're on a good path, and there's something valuable that you're creating.
Right. I mean, the way I often think about it is like, if you were to invest money in billboards, right? Mm-hmm. What's the ROI on a billboard? Hard to tell. But you can sort of tell from, like, for example, we did a wonderful series of ads in the New York Metro and subway that was all about like, X artist had Y tool, GTM has clay. So like, Da Vinci had the brush, GTM has clay. Michelangelo had the sculptor, right? Like GTM has clay, right? So you remember those, right? So like something like that sticks in people's minds. And so when you have everyone on the team saying that your friends or people you meet on the street are messaging you about ads that they saw on the subway, that's the ROI, right? Like you're trying to create a moment that people remember. That's the goal of a billboard campaign. And if you get enough of that validation from people, that's how you know it was successful. Right? There's no number that's ever going to prove that to you. It's more of a feeling that you can capture. And I think that a lot of people would do better to remember when you're trying to put out initiatives, especially on the marketing side, there are many things that you can determine ROI on very explicitly. Ads is maybe the best one of them. What's the cost per click? How many people are we targeting? How much pipeline are we creating? That's a full formula. But when you're running programs or events or billboard campaigns, you're trying to create a feeling. And I think you can very, very rarely measure feelings in exact numbers, but you can measure them sort of by how palpably they're felt.
Magic. You're creating magic.
Exactly, in some ways.
In some ways. So I need to put the cynical read in front of you. Are you investing in education at Clay because Clay is hard to use, it's very complicated, it's new to the market, and you need to teach the people how to use it? Or are you doing it because you really trust it, that's a powerful tool to pull people in, and you trust in the power of education?
I mean, a little bit of both, right? Like, I think that it is a little bit unique to our company that we have created a whole new industry of people that we need to now shift from a prior skill set to a new skill set. It's not one of one unique. I think any AI native player is probably running into this problem where people are used to an old way of doing things. AI has now introduced a new way of thinking about old problems, and to bring people from the old to the new requires some sort of a learning journey. So I think that we're not special in that regard, but not every company needs to do it. And then also I do think, even if we were a less complicated AI tool that was just taking one part of someone's job away, I do still think education, ecosystem, and learning is a powerful lever by which you can grow a business. Because if you become the default place people go to when they're searching for answers, you become the first line of defense for how they think about what they're up-leveling in their skill sets or their jobs, right? And like, as AI continues to change jobs faster and more frequently, the number one thing that we can all be certain of is that people will start to feel this fear again and again of, is my job at risk? Should I be reteaching myself how to work in the new era? If I'm reteaching myself how to work in the new era, where do I go? Is it YouTube? Is it LinkedIn? Is it a bunch of random courses? Probably. And then also, ideally, what we continue to cultivate over time is, if you are a GTM professional thinking about where the future of AI is going, there's an easy place for you to go. Go to the Clay website, go to the Clay University. We've got a bunch of programs, we've got a bunch of content. Some of it is even Clay related, some of it's not. And that's because we care about investing in taking this entire population that we care about into the new era of AI with us.
You talk a lot about caring about people, caring about your customers. You talk about critical thinking, about the value of human relationship building, and so on. What's your thesis on trust in general, and the value humans are bringing into the work?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's about trust, right? Like, I think people don't buy things from you unless they trust you. And trust is a complicated equation, right? Like, trust is built by some element of brand, right? So like, the more people know about your company, the more that they trust that you will literally continue to exist the next day. That's one of the hardest things about a new startup or a new entrant into the market, is that you don't have the established trust of market presence. And so you have to then build trust in other ways, right? A lot of business building is a trust building exercise. So new companies don't get to compete on brand trust. Therefore, they compete on how much faster can I act on your feedback trust? How much faster and more quickly can I help adapt to your business trust? Am I able to reposition myself as a new company in the market against the areas in which a larger company might be losing trust naturally because of who they are? What's interesting about the AI era is that you should, in concept, be able to, even as a larger company, act at some of the speed and agility of a smaller company. So you should be able to better trust-proof some of the moats that you would otherwise lose to new competitors in the market. But then there's a ton of other things that build trust, right? Is like, do I give you genuine, like, as a salesperson, I thought about trust all the time. And one of my biggest pet peeves as a buyer of software is when someone tells me something that I can tell they're just trying to say to get me to buy their software, and then I drill in and it's wrong. It's maybe a lie is a strong word, but it's like salesperson fluff to try and make sure that I was buying. For example, I'm not going to name any names.
For example,
I went through a whole evaluation process with a vendor 4 or 5 months ago. It came via Varun, who had met them at a specific event, and he had passed it along to me, and I'd said, look, I've evaluated this tool before. Here are the 3 things that I'm pretty sure they cannot do. And if they can't do those things, it's not even worth us talking to them again, because that's like a bare minimum for us to even consider switching. They told me they can do those things now. And I'm not going to name any specifics because I don't want to out the vendor. But over the course of 3 months, where they talked to us several times a week, and I was like, I don't care, just show me the things. And then they finally got their team involved and their solutions team involved, and they're like, yeah, you're right, that specific thing we can't do. And I was like, cool, thank you for wasting my time. Like, what you have now done is lose trust. Whereas, if they had told me up front, hey, we hear you, those are still things that we can't do today, let me like deeply understand your problem, and then, fine, don't talk to us right now. Now is not the right time, actually. But let me go talk to the engineering team. Let me go understand the features you're trying to build. When I have something that is interesting to what you are trying to accomplish, then let's restart the conversation, I would have been way more open to it. But now I have a sour taste in my mouth around that vendor. It's going to be infinitely harder for them, even if they build those features in the future, for me to even engage with a conversation with them, because I think I told you at the beginning what I was looking for, you did not listen to me, and then you wasted my time for 3 months. So everything is about trust building, sales, marketing, brand, you name it.
Yes, and as technology is progressing, as there's more commoditization of things and bits of work that we're doing and so on, I think human-to-human relationship is going to be extremely important. And the way some companies are built, like the principles they're building on, are extremely valuable. Like, how do you translate those principles into your branding, into whatever you're doing when it comes to go to market and talking to your customers? How are you treating your customers and so on? And in the time of where we are so hyped about the agentic future, and to circle back to my initial question and thesis, like where people are obsessed, where leaders are obsessed with automating a lot of work and replacing even certain positions with agents, like SDR agents and so on. Like the ones that are right now investing in the trust game, and humans that can do a deep critical thinking and decision making and relationship building are the ones that are winning.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, to me that just feels logical, right? Like, yes, you can put an SDR agent in front of me, and yes, if I have only the option of talking to 10 SDR agents,
yes,
then I'm going to pick the best SDR agent to buy from. However, someone at some point is going to think and say, oh, if I put a really talented human in that spot instead, and that human is now assisted by AI so that they can pick up the phone and reach out in a custom way that like an agent is never going to understand the human dynamics of a context with, they're going to do a better job. Or even if the agent does understand the context, we are still, for the foreseeable future, in an era where I am going to prefer talking to a human every step of the way. The only world in which that becomes not true is if AI gets better than the human at being able to surface context and memory and suggestions and language, which arguably we're not that far away from.
Not, yes.
But I would still then rather train the human to be better, right? Like the human using AI should always outperform AI on its own. The only worlds in which AI outperforms the human are when the human has not been skilled up to the extent that they need to in order to actually outperform, especially with an agent's help. And that's where the education, the learning, the community comes in. Like, again, I think I love that our company is often a microcosm of how we think the rest of the world should work. It makes the virtuous cycle so much easier, right? We are selling GTM software to people. We should be really good at GTM ourselves. And so I think we are constantly innovating on how we do GTM, and it makes it so much easier for me to go tell people, you probably should hire really talented headcount to do this, and also, do what I do, not what I say, because we are doing the exact same thing and seeing incredible results from it.
And we now sit in the time where humans are using clay.
Right, true.
So building a personal relationship, trust building channel makes complete sense.
Right.
Are you seeing a shift where agents are using your tool more and more? And what happens to this game that you're playing? I mean, right now, if majority of your users are actually agents.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people building in Clay are using agents. I mean, we have our own agent that you can use to build Clay tables as well. And so I've even seen some people using Codex to build Clay tables. I think that's great, right? Like, again, the building of a Clay table is also still not human work. It's me working with a computer software to do something. The outcomes of a system that I'm building with a Clay workbook or table then become automated enough that I can go do the human work more effectively. Right. But it makes total sense to me that agents will eventually get good enough, or already starting to get good enough, to be able to take the critical thinking that is inside your brain, translate that into a structure of a system that exists via Clay, and then you can modify, edit, and run that probably in such a regimented way that it's going to yield outsized results for what you build.
So do you think the education game is basically going to be less of a bet because agents are going to use Clay? Or no?
Because who's using the agent at the end of the day,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, you got to think about how to use the agent. If
Who's
you still
making
don't,
purchase decisions, you know?
yeah, exactly. I mean, also at the end of the day, like, you cannot instruct an agent to go build a clay table if you don't know how to build a clay table yourself. You have to understand all of the concepts, the ideas, the systems thinking, the structure. It's like bad prompting and good prompting. Most people that I talk to are still not that great at prompting. And I think that's not because of a lack of intelligence or capability to be good at prompting. It's just because they've never sat down and thought about what makes a good prompt, right? A lot of people just want a shortcut solution. Like, oh, I just want to say this thing and then do this thing and then it all works. Mm-hmm. If life were that easy, most of our systems wouldn't work today, right? So you still have to be a critical thinker. It just changes the level or modality or way in which we teach people to build problems. Ultimately, if you want to solve an outbound problem, we are not, and I don't think we'll ever actually get to a point where you can just tell an agent, hey, go fix my outbound problem in a clay table, right? That requires zero human thinking. The agent has to understand, what is the outbound problem? Do you mean the volume? Do you mean the conversion rate? Do you mean the ICP, the targeting, the messaging, the copywriting, the signal? There's a million things that could make it a better table. You have to tell me what that thing is. And if you don't understand how to actually communicate, digest, and understand what the critical problems are behind how you build a table, good luck.
And for the end, let's can you give me like one single advice to founders out there listening to this today on how to build forward deploy human value organization, and how to structure, how to make decisions, to have a learning organization, with the forward deployed human instead of, forward embedded AI and deployed AI and automation. Rather focus on building value and relationships than, just being obsessed with numbers and work optimization and automation.
Yeah, I think the number one piece of advice I would have is just always be creative. Right? Most of the time, cost cutting and optimization is the least creative answer. It's the simplest thing that you can do. Also, if you're a founder, what are you cost cutting at the end of the day? If you're just getting started, if you can be creative about how you get in touch with people, if you can be creative about how you provide success and results for people, and if you can continue to do those creative things in scaled, effective ways, you will always have a competitive edge in the market. It just depends on how you go about executing, and it depends on how long you need to take to execute, because sometimes these things do just take time to whittle around and figure out until you can hit your moment. I think Clay is actually in many ways a great example of that story. I think it was 7 years. People still don't really know this, that we existed before we actually had sort of a breakout moment that now has helped the tool become what it is today.
Thank you, Yash, for this conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. Great questions.